38%. Between the ages of 18 to 24, which is the normal age of most college students, only 38% voted in the last presidential election. This leaves 62% of people within our age group who either are not passionate enough, they're not informed enough, or they just carelessly choose to neglect one of the most important opportunities that we have as citizens, which would be voting. But why? Not only in the most recent election, but the election years before have also not been very optimistic for our generation within voting. Within the last 10 presidential elections between 1976 and now, the highest percentage of people between our age category in voter turnout was only about 44%, which happened to be in the 2008 election between Senator John McCain and Barack Obama. So why does such a drastic lack of participation in this opportunity and privilege exist among our generation? In the presidential elections between 1964 and 1972, the voter turnout for our age group hovered at just over 50%. Over half of the individuals in our age category voted. So why the sudden drop and lack of participation? What is it that is holding our generation back? Are we distracted by bigger issues such as social media, Facebook, Twitter, and the hot topics that society is telling us are more important? Or are we too caught up in planning our careers and our 5-year plans that we don't give attention to an area that's going to drastically affect those plans in the first place? So were the candidates simply just better in those years? Even in the years of some of the most honored candidates such as Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, who only received 42% of student turnout, there's an evident lacking on the involvement of our generation within politics.
But what is the reason that this generation is so uninvolved in the polls? Naturally, as the youngest age group that is able to be involved in voting, we are slow to realize our need to participate, but that doesn't negate the importance of it. Whether we realize it or not, the reality is that the candidate elected in this election year will majorly impact every decision that we have, from jobs to families. We are a generation that is experiencing the results of the leaders in place from our parents before us. And like our parents probably did, we are focusing on the right now of school, of jobs after college, of our 5-year plans, like Cassy said. We are not mindful of how this leader will naturally change our own lives and our lives of our families ahead of us in these areas. I mean, take a moment to process on things have already changed since our childhood. As elementary students, we were given an opportunity to pray in class through moments of silence, but now students are encouraged not to talk about their faith or religion with their peers or their teachers. What direction is our country headed in, and what is your response to that? Think about your own children one day. What is the impact that you want to give them tomorrow through your actions of today? Whether we are uneducated or unaware of the importance of voting, or if we just view it as an area of low importance, we need to wake up and realize that the elected candidate will have a huge impact on how we handle ourselves, our jobs, and our lives, and our role in this society.
So Democratic, Republican, or independent candidate aside, the low voter turnout of our generation is a stark contrast to the 60 to 70% participation in the generation of our parents and our grandparents and the people that were before us. So why is it that our grandparents and our parents realize the importance of this privilege, whereas we generally are not acknowledging that? So we are the people that it's going to impact in the first place, so we need to be the ones that have the participation or choosing to be involved to set the tone for our children and the later generations that are to come. So there may not be one answer to pinpoint as the answer to this issue, but the truth still remains the same, that we are lacking in our duty as citizens and neglecting the privilege we've been given to support those who are going to stand up for our beliefs. Remember in 1964, when the voting turnout for our category of 18 to 24-year-olds was 50%. Today, 52 years later, that age group now falls into the 65 years and older category, a group that has been steady and rising in numbers ever since, aka our parents and our grandparents and all the people that you will see in line at the polls anyways. But these individuals were the ones who understood the freedom that political participation was, because they also witnessed the downfall of life without it. The older generations embraced the freedom that they fought so hard to ensure. In every term, that passion has begun to diminish and diminish more and more over time. So simply put, our grandparents have realized the privilege that they had to vote and the impact of this privilege as they see that played out in us and our generation, and they have valued that ever since. Whereas again, we do not. And so what kind of legacy are we leaving for our kids and the generations again that are rising up? So on the opposite side of that, rather than participating, We often tend to naturally voice our frustrations with the direction of our country and our leaders through opinions on how things should be, rather than embracing our freedom to do something about it. Rather than critiquing and criticizing the leadership that we have and the political decisions that were made, we need to remember that we get a say in the candidate who's making those decisions.
A long time ago, when the idea of a democracy or a leader elected by the people was ludicrous, the Founding Fathers had an idea. They penned into our history this legacy. It is an indispensable duty which we owe to God, our country, ourselves, and posterity by all lawful ways and means in our power to maintain, defend, and preserve these civil and religious liberties for which many of our fathers fought, bled, and died, and to hand them out entire to our future generations. The Founding Fathers believed so intently it was a duty of a citizen in this country to preserve the rights they worked so hard to achieve. At this point in history, they were mindful of the generations to come. They were mindful of us and our duty to maintain this responsibility. Of course, voting. Not exercising this important right to choose the elected leader of our country is to depreciate and negate the sacrifice that hundreds of men in the 1700s and thousands of men and women still today made to preserve and protect that right. This incredible privilege is taken for granted year after year. Only 38% of us were able to stand in line at the polling location November 4 years ago and vote for the president. Not only did our Founding Fathers and our nation's leaders long for our vote and to be heard, they believed in a sense of spirituality to be included in our freedom. Consider James Madison, who valued the area of religious freedom more than any other principle of his beliefs, and felt that the government should have no role in our faith other than ensuring the freedom to embrace it. There was an emphasis on religious tolerance that these individuals saw as important enough to fight for it, so they fought to establish it. Years later, we are a generation that takes for granted this right so easily, and we sit back and watch it wither day by day. Students, we cannot afford to not participate. Our lack of participation because we don't have time or we aren't involved is the undoing of what the Founding Fathers gave their lives for.
More importantly, think about the duty of the call of a Christian within politics rather than just the American citizen. As a group of people who are hopefully striving to continue that legacy and the beliefs that others, like our Founding Fathers and leaders, have fought so hard to establish, how are we continuing to maintain that? It's not a surprise or a shock to any of us that the Christian values that were established in our country through our Founding Fathers and our leaders are gradually shrinking in their priority. So as Christians, what is our response to that? Do we sit silently as these values are neglected and we continue to not vote and not participate and not take a stand for things that are going to affect us in the future and our children as they grow up in a culture and a society that's continuing to have Christ as a lower priority? Or do we stay grounded and choose to stick up for those beliefs? The choice is up to all of us every time we get to go participate in an election, and not just for the president, but for members of Congress and every other aspect within politics. But the choice is up to us. Only about 50% of Christians in America are registered to vote. Of that 50%, only 50% even show up to the polls. So this is a sad reality that 75% of all believers within our nation are not valuing highly enough one of their greatest privileges and callings, but instead are choosing to be inactive. We're choosing to watch Christ and watch our faith become a less priority every year. So we have a calling as Christians to participate and to be active within politics and our country's leaders. Deuteronomy 1:13 states, "Choose for your tribes wise, understanding, and experienced men, and I will appoint them as your heads." Throughout Scripture, there are several examples of the effect of ungodly and negative leaders on God's people. We must understand that we do get a say in who leads us. For in Scripture, these individuals who suffered from this leadership, their freedom was lost and they had to abide by this leadership that was damaging to their nation. So not only do we get to choose, but we are told to choose wise, understanding, and experienced men. And these characteristics, not in our own understanding, but how the Lord views wise, understanding, and experienced men. So we must have this mindset in the election process as we're choosing the leaders of our country. The truth is, no matter who the candidate is, as Christians, we're called to submit to them no matter who they are. In Romans 1:14, it says to let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, we will have to submit to whoever it may be, but we are still left with a choice. We can sit back and submit to the authorities who contradict our beliefs in the lives that we're called to live, or we can accept our call as believers to support and choose men and women who will lead us accordingly and maintain our Christian values that were fought for so hard early by our leaders.
We have a freedom and a calling, so choose to respond. Though we are called to submit, we also have an incredible opportunity to elect the authority to which we submit. So then our calling becomes twofold. First to elect, then to submit. So vote, but not just for president. Vote for Congress, vote for senator, vote for district judge and the school board. The people that are elected into these positions are going to be the people that continue to rise to power within our government. Every leader makes a difference, not just the president. This November, the ballot in the poll booths will have an option for president, but it will have a choice for senators, for secretaries of states, for treasurers, for governors, everything. Showing up to the polls is about so much more than voting for the commander-in-chief. Though that weighty position certainly needs our input, your contribution will affect every power down the line as well. Without voting, you negate your voice in not only the election, but also in your city and your state, because you won't be showing up to vote for the rulers of those either. This November will certainly be a historic election. This is your opportunity to use your voice to shape your future and your family's futures. Take the first step and show up to those polling locations. Encourage your friends as a body of Christ to challenge one another, to understand our roles as Christians in politics and the direction of our countries. Your voice could be more powerful this election than ever before. I would love to see so many more than 38% of our generation show up to the polls, and I would love to see so many more than 50% of Christians be even registered to vote. Will you stand up and use the voice that the Lord has given you?